I first came to Puerto Rico in the 1960s. The culture is different from the mainland, right? Here, you know all of your neighbors. Puerto Ricans are resilient, and they're tolerant, and they're peaceful. It's home. This is home.
The National Hurricane Center has just issued their latest bulletin. It is still a Category 5, still 160-mile-per-hour sustained winds as it barrels towards Puerto Rico.
I was on travel. I had just given a talk in Las Vegas. I got a call from Linda. I remember she called me to just say she wasn't feeling well, a little dizzy. And then at some point I told her, get to the hospital. And so she did, and turned out she had a stroke. It was a terrifying feeling, being so distant and disconnected. And so my only thought was to get back to Puerto Rico. Thank God I was actually able to get on a flight. And we knew that this hurricane was brewing, Maria.
Hurricane Maria continues as a dangerous major Category 5 hurricane headed toward Puerto Rico, potentially a catastrophic event here for the Caribbean.
Most of these hurricanes go south and miss Puerto Rico, and I just assumed that would be the case. We just kept hearing that Maria was coming, it was coming, and then we knew it was going to hit.
The eye of Hurricane Maria just came ashore in Puerto Rico.
There will be weeks without power. There may be weeks without water.
Prayers are needed for this area.
Hurricane Maria came towards us with very forceful winds, lots of rain. You could hear the debris moving about. And you can't sleep. You can't sleep with all the noise.
It was scary, particularly because the potential interruption in medical care for Linda really had me worried. We had no clue what was going on, what those enormous sounds, the sound of steel scraping, was frightening. It sounded like a jet was in front of the house, lining up to take off.
I had to try to sleep as much as I could because I was very weak.
I remember when the eye of the storm was passing over and there was a calm, a brief calm. We knew that people were going to die.
Yo nací en este campo aquí de Utuado, ha vivido toda la vida. Mi hijo Jonathan tiene 12 años cumplidos. Mi esposa llevamos 26 años de casados y gracias a Dios hemos tenido altas y bajas, pero siempre hemos estado unidos. Nosotros venimos de herencia de agricultores. Mi abuelo, el papá de mi padre, venía de la agricultura. Ser agricultor es un trabajo como si fuera un abogado, porque tú tienes que defender cosas. La agricultura es una planta que sufre, llora como nosotros, crece como nosotros, tiene oxígeno como nosotros. Y si tú le das cariño, ella produce. Pero si tú la marchitas, no produce. Cuando vino el huracán María, mi madre estaba viva. Porque mi madre necesitaba tener tanque de oxígeno todo el tiempo. Y entonces hubo que moverla por la quebrada, que cualquier cosa si le pasaba algo a ella, como no hay luz. Vino el huracán y lo azotó duro. Perdimos todo lo que tenía la agricultura, se perdió todo. Mi madre en ese tiempo falleció. Y entonces tuvimos que batallar para sobrevivir sin luz. María sí me cambió mucho la vida. Es fuerte. Son los recuerdos de mi madre. Esa pregunta que tú me hiciste me llegó al corazón.
The Puerto Rico Electric Power Authority, PREPA, was created in 1941 or so. One of the big ideas behind creating PREPA was to provide service to the entire population, even in the rural and very remote areas. PREPA accomplished an enormous feat. It electrified all of Puerto Rico around the late 70s, early 80s. And that was very important. But PREPA's adherence to fossil fuels and not moving quickly enough to renewables has been very problematic. After Hurricane Maria, everyone was without power. Energy justice is specific to having access to affordable energy. Energy justice also has to do a lot with the burdens of the current kinds of electric systems that prevail and not be overburdened by pollution and polluting sources like landfills and power plants. We all know nowadays electricity is not a luxury, it's a necessity. There are people here that pay up to 40% of their income to pay for their electric bills. We're seeing a very interesting situation, very important and sort of sad situation here in Puerto Rico where people who are better off, usually people who are white, have more access to power, to electric service than people of color and people who are poor. And there's a very high poverty rate here, a 44% poverty rate, so it's very much an issue of equity and access to that essential electric service that can determine life or death. The power outage after Hurricane Maria was the longest power outage in the history of the United States, and I believe the second longest in the history of the world. Not a record that anybody wants to break.
After Maria, we were not prepared. Electricity was completely down and out. There was no water being pumped. Hospitals were closed. Emergency rooms were not functioning. Doctors' cell phones weren't operating. None of the ATM machines worked. There was no way to get cash. The first day we had food, and after about 24 hours, the food in the refrigerator was done. Then it became a matter of scavenging, walking about. We couldn't know when the water trucks would appear because the radios weren't working. There was no communication.
It was very dark in the house. We hunkered down and stayed in. It was a very tough situation. It was critical.
It was hot, it was humid, and then I remember Linda's pressure dropping rapidly. Playing doctor when you don't know what you're doing is on the scary side. Just monitoring her and keeping track of her meds was terrifying. We had a car battery here. We had these fans that were battery operated. And so the initial plan was to hook up the battery, simply keep these fans running so that Linda could have some relief. I rigged a fan up and it worked. And then eventually, days after, the 12-volt battery itself had discharged. And I knew at that time, this isn't sustainable. And I made a decision to leave. We went to the airport to try to get flights. It was havoc. The tower was out. The way they were directing flights was a pair of binoculars. And then while we were there, they said, you know, we can't allow her on an airplane. And so I showed her the medical records, that Linda had had a stroke, that she had had it just very recently, and that there was no medical care. And she said, wait. So I waited 10 minutes. She came back out and said, here are 2 tickets to get to the United States.
To leave I was sad to leave all my neighbors. Everybody was suffering. I was sad to leave my home, but I knew I had to get medical care. And that was in Boston.
We got on an airplane, landed in Boston, and Linda went to the hospital. That was the reason we went back. But I had mixed feelings. And then I went back to my office, and sitting there as this academic faculty member was a little surreal. I realized at that point that it could have been a lot better for us if we had solar power. If we had the power just to keep the refrigerator going. And then I thought about the fact that we were the very lucky ones, right? Linda's alive and recovering. We were very fortunate. There were thousands of people that aren't here today, thousands of people. And we were angry about this. Solar energy would have made a huge difference. A 1 kilowatt power plant in a house could have kept a lot of people alive. Electricity is an essential component of living.
After Hurricane Maria, there was a sense of utter disbelief. To put things into perspective, just imagine almost 3.5 million people all of a sudden without any electricity, and there's no way to pipe it in from anywhere else. When most people think about electricity, they don't think about saving human lives. I've heard one estimate, somewhere in the vicinity of 4,000 people died as a consequence of Hurricane Maria. And they died slowly and in some cases very painfully. Since Hurricane Maria, at least a couple 100,000 islanders have left. At its height, I think in the 1970s, Puerto Rico was coming close to 4 million inhabitants, and now it's dropped down to about 3.2 million, and I expect that number to continue to diminish. I think for Puerto Rico's future, more attention is going to have to be paid to its energy future. And it's not going to be with fossil fuels. They're extremely unreliable. And unfortunately, the way the electric grid is operated, there are only a few plants. And when one of them is damaged, you have literally 1 million people without power.
Well, let me say this. I have no idea whether this is all going to work. There's a lot of moving parts. You can think of it as a symphony. Electricity in Puerto Rico is very expensive and unreliable. So people need to have the option to throw a switch, go off the grid, and get their electricity from the sun, because the sun is going to come up every day. The idea that I have is that we can refurbish and reconfigure nickel metal hydride batteries, Prius batteries, and we can use them for a low-cost energy storage and solar photovoltaic system. So the way that works is this. Solar panels provide electricity during the daytime. When the sun comes down, there's no more energy to convert. You must draw your energy from storage systems, and there lies the need for the batteries. The focus of my academic group is nickel metal hydride batteries, which are prevalent in the Toyota Prius, Camry, and a variety of other hybrid vehicles. That's where my group has expertise. We have learned to recover lost capacity in these batteries. And that recovery of lost capacity is what we call reconditioning. Batteries have a lot of moving parts. And like people, batteries breathe. People breathe air, batteries breathe charge. Imagine a human being who's limited to a very shallow depth of breath, right? So you're not using your full lung capacity. Now that lung capacity can be recovered with deep breathing. With batteries, you have a similar situation. And the solution is like battery, deep charge, and discharge. The idea is to extend the cradle to grave life cycle. So by refurbishing them, we extend their lifetime, and by repurposing them, we add another step. We fill another demand that wasn't there at the beginning, and that is solar energy storage. These batteries, these reconditioned and reconfigured batteries, some of them may not be powerful enough for a hybrid vehicle on the freeway, but they're more than powerful enough to power a homeowner's refrigerator or TV set or dialysis machine. We're not talking about 10 kilowatt hours of energy. We're talking about Puerto Ricans in the countryside that use a couple of kilowatt hours per day. They can get all of that requirement fulfilled from the sun. We believe that we can light up a good fraction of houses in Puerto Rico using this concept of repurposed batteries.
Even before the hurricanes, we've been talking and thinking about how to transform our electric system from this very centralized, fossil-fired, undemocratic system to something that is much more accessible to people and communities. Even if these transmission and distribution lines were all rebuilt, which is what the government of Puerto Rico is proposing now, to rebuild that same system with the FEMA disaster recovery funds. Even if they did that, we know from experience that hurricanes will come through again and knock them down, if not the next, the one after that. That has been the experience in the past 30 years. The design of the system is not good, and we should not repeat it.
We have breaking news out of Puerto Rico at this hour. A strong earthquake struck overnight, causing a blackout across the U.S. territory. The magnitude 6.4 earthquake comes one day after a 5.8 magnitude quake damaged homes and caused landslides there.
In a new era of greatly reduced rainfall and the worst drought in more than 20 years, the most precious commodity these days is water.
And of course, on top of all of that, Puerto Rico has been battling a steady uptick in coronavirus cases.
I learned about Ramon by accident. Linda and I were having coffee in a cafe in San Juan. And I knew at that time that I wanted to build a prototype energy storage and solar photovoltaic system for a family. Old San Juan wasn't where I was going to find that family. And sitting 3 tables away from us was this gentleman. And he said, I know where these families are.
Antes de llegar al huracán, la luz se iba mucho. Es todavía así y se sigue yendo. A veces pasan la semana y no hay luz. Son muchos barrios que todavía no tienen ni luz. Me encantaba trabajar, sí, me ponía contento, empezar de nuevo, pero me tuve que ir a la construcción a trabajar para el sostén de mis hijos y de más familia. Los días son largos, sí, en la construcción. A veces los trabajos se ponen difíciles para hacer. Cuando más necesito, le pido al Señor que me dé fortaleza para seguir trabajando. Si Dios quiere, seguir bregando en la agricultura. Y ese es el camino que yo le pienso dejar a mi hijo, la agricultura. Eso es una felicidad que todo mundo quisiera tener.
Ramon is in the central part of Puerto Rico. This is where the worst of the worst damage occurred. And Ramon represents Puerto Rico. Not the people of Old San Juan, the privileged people of Old San Juan, where I live. Typical of Puerto Ricans in the Campo. They are generous, they are kind, they lend a helping hand. They don't ask for anything, and they're content. They feel they have reliable energy, but they don't have a concept of what real reliable energy is, such as, say, maybe a Bostonian would have. So Ramon represents central Puerto Rico. By using repurposed hybrid vehicle batteries, we can bring energy to everyone and anyone. We need something affordable, simple, and easy to deploy. There are home power systems out there. You have, say, for example, the Tesla Powerwall. A Powerwall is an elegant but expensive solution to solar energy. If you bring a Powerwall to Central Africa, they're going to laugh at you. 44% of the population of Puerto Rico is below the poverty line. About 10% of the world lives on less than $2 a day. Who has the money for a Powerwall? The most expensive part, the showstopper, is the cost of energy storage, the batteries. We cannot deliver expensive lithium-ion batteries to someone whose income is below $12,000 a year. It doesn't make sense. Drinking water, clean air, electricity are not luxuries. They're essentials. You need them to live.
Believe it or not, despite our crises, there's always been in Puerto Rico a sense of resilience, because to be candid, Hurricane Maria is not the first time we've gone through a hurricane. It's the first time in the modern era where we rely so much upon electricity. When it comes to climate change, we're not sure what the long-term consequences are going to be in terms of weather patterns. Puerto Rico is facing a lot of crises, from the fiscal to the shock of Hurricane Maria, the earthquakes, COVID. I don't think the island is truly prepared for yet another hurricane season, but whether we're ready or not, it's coming.
If we are striving for energy democracy, you need people to become energy literate. We have not implemented a plan, especially as to electric service, that will allow us to survive the next storm without losing many lives the way we did after Hurricane Maria. We haven't implemented a plan that will make us resilient.
Ramon's house is the perfect test bed for us. Why? Because first, he doesn't have an enormous energy need. None of what we're doing has been done before. And so we're going to go out to Puerto Rico, build a system using a modified inverter, a reconfigured battery, and we're going to actually assemble a system. We're talking about knocking holes through the wall, putting in PVC tubing, none of which us academicians have experience in doing. So this is what we're going to do. We're going to build a mini house on the campus of Northeastern that will support half the number of panels that we want to put on Ramon's house.
That's good.
No one has ever reconfigured a Prius battery to be integrated with an inverter designed for a 24-volt lead-acid battery. All of this has to be previewed. And so what we must do in Boston is test every single electronic and battery component. And we have to know that we can scale it for Puerto Rico. What we're talking about is a prototype of all the electronics. We're going to put it together and just see what we can do to fix the problems.
Rooftop solar and battery energy storage systems provide a local source of energy that is less vulnerable to climatic events. It's the definition of resilient energy, actually. If you're generating locally, sure, a hurricane could come in and knock out some of your panels, but it doesn't take down a whole transmission line that serves hundreds of thousands of people the way we see now. There's a unique opportunity to finance this with the disaster recovery funds that have already been allocated to PREPA. PREPA has an allocation of $9.6 billion from FEMA, the largest FEMA allocation of funds in its history. In the history of FEMA, ever. And so that is an opportunity to finance the total transformation of the electric system here based on community localized energy generation.
So today's the day. We are going to test this system out on Ramon's house. And it's been a lot of work. It's been a couple of years in the making. We've simulated this system in Boston.
Let's see.
The guys have put an enormous amount of work. We had a little setback due to COVID, but we're going to give this a shot.
We're going to lay out the panels. All right. We're going to start with these brackets, line them up, and just do one panel at a time until we get it done.
Are you all right?
The stair collapsed. I fell through and I hurt my...
Did you hurt your
No. Where my Achilles tendon is, it hurts.
That could be serious.
Uh-oh.
You think you pulled it? That's tough.
And that's disconnected.
That's disconnected.
Uh-oh. So you feel that?
Yeah.
There's nothing there. I think we should go to the hospital.
Yep. Don't put pressure on it, because that could be worse, because the tendon is pretty bad.
No, I have a problem.
Okay. Be careful.
This is a problem. I'm going nowhere. I may be in a hospital. I feel okay, it's just that where you would feel a stiffness where a tendon is, I don't feel that. I'm worried that I damaged my tendon. But I don't know, I'm not a doctor. You know, it's kind of funny in a way. You think you got all the bases covered, but you don't think about a stair giving way. Unfortunate. You know, this is a bit of a setback. Unfortunately, here in Utuado and at the hospital at Juntas, they can't afford to have an MRI machine. They only have X-rays. And for that, I've got to go back to San Juan. I really wanted to see this through to the end. And I hate to have to leave, but I have to get back and get this MRI and find out what kind of any surgery I may need. This is very frustrating. We've put a lot of time into this. I really wanted to be there when we flipped the switch, but I have a lot of confidence in John and Marlon. These guys are going to be able to pull it off. My main issue is that I just would have liked to have been there because this has never been done before. I can tell now I'm going to be watching this from FaceTime, and that's a bit of a bummer. You know, when we built the prototype on the campus of Northeastern, we tried to anticipate every possible problem that could occur, with the exception of unexpected delays. Delays due to rain, me falling through a stairwell, and now delays due to the road being blocked because of a water main rupture. These are things that you just can't anticipate. And there's more yet to come, possibly.
When I saw Eugene get hurt, I was first scared for him. Second, how are we going to do this without our captain? We've been working on this for 3 years now, and we've come this far. We weren't going to give up. We kind of have to shift our tactics.
I don't know if you've been to Puerto Rico in July, but it's hot. I'm originally from Haiti. I'm used to the sun, but when we got to the roof, we were beaten down real quickly.
Another example of our naivete, thinking that myself and 2 of my staff would come out and do this installation. You know, we assumed we were going through cinder block, easy to drill through. It would be like a scale up of the simulation. Very naive. When we got there, it turned out the cinder block was behind a concrete wall. There was no way we would ever be able to drill through that.
Turns out concrete is very hard to get through, and we didn't have the proper tools to drill through it.
And a miracle happened. Ramon's next door neighbor had a chippy hammer for knocking through concrete. He had the equipment that we lacked, and he had the experience that we didn't have. What we left Boston with was totally inadequate to complete the job. And the neighborhood filled the gap and did a beautiful job.
We are engineers, chemists, and scientists. With Eugene down and in the hospital, we needed the help of an electrician. This is not something that we've ever experienced before.
Being here in Puerto Rico is much different than it was in Boston. You know, tools, equipment, etc. It's just a different ballgame. Having a master electrician like Tito Kayak, who couldn't have done this without him, he was crucial to the project.
Yo soy electricista de profesión, ¿no? Y recientemente comencé ya a tomar unos cursos relacionados con energía solar. Y pues que Jim me hubiera dado la oportunidad de estar con él y con su grupo de trabajo para implementar este sistema acá en el campo en Puerto Rico, pues yo creo que es muy positivo en términos de que alienta y es la respuesta a un problema grande de energía que tenemos.
So let me give you a reason for solar energy. In 2017, the average income in Puerto Rico was below $13,000 a year, and a kilowatt hour costs roughly 3 times the dollars it does in the United States. And where does that energy come from? To give you an example, in 2002, PREPA made a contract with AES to build a coal-fired plant in Guayama. So 1 out of 10 people in Guayama have cancer, 1 out of 4 have cardiac problems, and 1 out of 3 have respiratory problems. And all of this is due to coal ash. Coal ash is killing people in Guayama. Do we need more reasons for solar energy? Ramon is an experiment, right? We've sort of put all the pieces together. And so what this all means is that this idea I came to back in 2017, in between Maria and Linda's recovery, this idea, this fantasy that we could repurpose Prius batteries for low-income energy storage can be a reality.
All right, Gene, we're about to turn everything on. We're gonna do the switch from the grid to off to solar, okay?
All right, well, this has been a couple of years in the making. It's been a long ride. So if this works, it's gonna be great for Puerto Rico.
Gene, we're gonna go right now from the grid to off, okay? You'll see the lights shut off.
God, I hope this works.
Okay, off, good. All right, let's take a second. And then, Marlon, are you ready?
Yeah, I'm ready.
All right, we're gonna shift to solar.
All right.
And the band's on.
¿Todo bien? Gracias.
Muchas gracias, se te quiere mucho.
Abrazo grande. Grande.
I want to thank Ramon and Jonathan and Ilsa for letting us use your house to do this experiment. So just to let you know, you've done as much to help us as we have to help you. It's both ways. We benefited and we learned a lot by doing this. So thank you.
Just didn't expect all this emotions from this. It means a lot, you know? After all this, to see this reaction, it's insane for us to be feeling it too, which is nice, you know? It's beautiful.
I'm relieved, obviously a little emotional. I'm a pretty emotional guy, like I cry a lot during weddings and stuff, so this is good feeling. Happy for him, happy it works.
You know, in pure academics, the final step in any science project is articulation of the results. If you don't articulate the results, then you've done nothing. But now we can take it further, right? This was experiential. Ramon and Nilsa opened up their hearts and their house to us. And what this does, I think, for anyone that needs energy storage, particularly people in Puerto Rico, is that it provides an alternative, right? That's affordable and reliable, and it empowers them. They can control their own energy with the throw of a switch.
Esa energía que llegó a mi casa, eso es lo más grande que ha pasado. Gracias a Dios, esa energía solar nos va a afectar mucho a nosotros, porque ya no sufrimos por la luz, que eso era un problema, la luz. Nos quedábamos semanas sin luz. Ya con la energía solar nos beneficia mucho, no tenemos que sufrir. Ahora mismo yo me siento el hombre más millonario que hay con la luz solar. Me siento el hombre más millonario. Hay otras personas que quisieran tener lo mismo para no sufrir.
Desde el punto de vista económico es una gran ayuda. Desde el punto de vista de la ineficiencia del sistema, vaya, si se va la luz, la gente va a tener luz. Así pues, y si tenemos sol, estamos en el Caribe todo el tiempo, podemos generar luz continuamente. Así que por todos lados es bueno.
We need reliable energy for us to be able to rebuild. And so being able to no longer rely on the major power grids to be able to produce electricity at home or more locally holds out hope.
Certainly what I love about Puerto Rico are the people and the culture, the way we come together in times of need. I think that Puerto Rico can become a really viable, vibrant paradise.
No individual component of what I've done is strikingly new. There's nothing that I've done that's revolutionary, right? I figured out how to recondition batteries and electronics, right? Which many academicians can do. But there's something to making technology accessible to change the way the world works. Fibonacci didn't invent arithmetic, but he changed the world because he made arithmetic accessible so that everyone could do commerce. Steve Jobs, he didn't invent computers, but what he did was he put them on everybody's desktop. These are my inspirations. My goal is to continue bringing electrochemistry to the streets so that everyone can benefit.
Estar en la granja me gustaría hasta lo último, que Dios me dé vida. Le doy las gracias y las bendiciones, que el Señor los bendiga, cuiden a su esposa, a sus hijos y a su familia. Lloro, pero es de alegría.